At 2:37 a.m., a single, childish giggle echoed from the attic right above my head. We don't have children. That sound, clear as a bell in the dead quiet of the countryside, snapped me out of a deep sleep. It wasn't a dream. It was high-pitched, short, and filled with a kind of playful malice that made the hair on my arms stand straight up. I lay perfectly still, my body rigid, my ears straining against the silence that followed. My wife, Anna, was a heavy sleeper, her breathing a soft, steady rhythm beside me, completely undisturbed. The house was silent again, save for the familiar hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the distant chorus of crickets outside. For a moment, I tried to bargain with my own senses. Was it the wind whistling through a crack in the old farmhouse roof? A stray cat? My mind desperately scrambled for a logical foothold, anything to pull me back from the ledge of panic. We had bought the place 3 months earlier, a sprawling 2-story farmhouse built in the early 1900s. It was our escape from the city, our dream of quiet summer nights and wide, open spaces. The real estate agent, a cheerful woman with a practiced smile, had breezed through the tour. When I'd pointed to the square hatch in the upstairs hallway ceiling, she'd waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, that's just the attic. Haven't been up there in years. Probably just dust and squirrels," we'd laughed. The price was right, the land was beautiful, and the idea of a dusty, forgotten attic just added to the rustic charm. We hadn't given it a second thought. I lay there for what felt like an eternity, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. Nothing. The silence was absolute. Slowly, I began to relax. "You're tired," I told myself. "You're in a new, old house. It makes noises. You dreamed it." I closed my eyes, focusing on the rhythm of Anna's breathing, trying to let it lull me back to sleep. That's when I heard the scraping. It was a soft, dry sound directly overhead. The sound of something light being dragged across rough, unfinished floorboards. Scrape, drag, stop. Then again. Scrape, drag, stop. It was rhythmic, deliberate. This wasn't a squirrel, scurry. This was methodical. My blood ran cold. Someone, or something, was moving around up there. The image of the attic hatch, just a simple piece of plywood held by a latch, flashed in my mind. I had to know. Fear is a paralyzing thing, but the terror of the unknown is a powerful motivator. Slipping out of bed as quietly as I could, the old floorboards groaning in protest, I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find in the dark, a thick glass bookend from the nightstand. It felt pitifully inadequate. I crept out of the bedroom and into the hallway. The air here felt different, colder. A definite draft seemed to be seeping down from the ceiling. My eyes locked onto the attic hatch. It was closed just as we'd left it. I stood there, bookend raised, listening. The scraping had stopped. The silence pressed in on me again, thick and suffocating. "Is anyone there?" I whispered, my voice trembling and weak. The only answer was the frantic pounding in my ears. I felt a surge of foolishness. Maybe it was the house settling. Maybe I was losing my mind. I was about to turn back to the bedroom when the whispering started. It was so faint at first I thought I was imagining it. A low, sibilant murmur, like wind rustling through dead leaves. But it wasn't the wind. It was a voice distorted and airy, coming from directly behind the attic door. It was impossible to make out words, but the cadence was conversational, as if someone was having a quiet, one-sided chat with themselves. My carefully constructed rationalizations crumbled into dust. This was real. This was happening. My hands, slick with sweat, reached up to the simple metal latch on the hatch. Part of my brain was screaming at me to run, to grab Anna and get out of the house and never look back. But another part, the part that needed to see, to confront the source of this terror, took over. With a shaking hand, I twisted the latch. Instead of a pull-down ladder, which I expected, there was just the square of plywood. It was meant to be pushed up. Gathering all my courage, I used the bookend to nudge the corner of the hatch. It lifted easily, silently, and a cascade of cold, musty air and dust rained down on my face. The smell was overwhelming, a century of decay, dry rot, and something else. Something faintly sweet and cloying like old perfume. I held my phone up, its flashlight beam cutting a nervous, trembling path into the oppressive darkness. The attic was exactly as the agent had described it, a vast, low, ceilinged space filled with exposed beams, thick cobwebs, and a floor layered in an inch of gray, undisturbed dust. I swept the light from one end to the other. Nothing, just empty, forgotten space. Relief and confusion warred within me. Had the sound been a trick of the acoustics? Had it come from outside after all? I was about to lower the hatch, ready to convince myself I had experienced some kind of auditory hallucination, when my light snagged on something in the far corner, partially hidden behind a thick wooden support beam. My heart stopped. It was a small wooden rocking horse. It was old, the paint faded and chipped, with one of its button eyes missing. But that wasn't what made my breath catch in my throat. We didn't own a rocking horse. We hadn't put it up there, and across the entire dusty floor, there were no footprints. Not ours, not anyone's. It was a perfect, untouched blanket of gray, except for the small patch of floor where the rocking horse stood. It was as if it had simply materialized there. I kept the light fixed on it, unable to look away. The single button eye seemed to stare back at me with a vacant, knowing intensity. As I watched paralyzed, the horse began to rock, slowly, gently, a single silent rock forward, then back, then still. A scream was building in my throat, hot and sharp, but it wouldn't come out. I stumbled backward, my hand fumbling for the bedroom door. My phone slipped from my grasp, clattering to the floor and plunging the hallway into darkness. I didn't stop for it. I burst into the bedroom, slamming the door shut and fumbling with the lock. "What is it? What's wrong?" Anna was sitting bolt upright in bed, her voice sharp with alarm. I couldn't form words. I could only point a shaking finger at the ceiling and stammer, "The attic. There's something in the attic." She saw the sheer, unadulterated terror on my face and didn't question me. We spent the rest of the night huddled in the corner of the room, a flimsy barricade of pillows around us, listening. We didn't hear the giggling or the whispers again, but we did hear one more sound just before dawn. A soft, rhythmic creaking from the hallway floorboards right outside our door. The sound of a small, wooden rocking horse, rocking back and forth, in the dark. We sold the house that fall at a significant loss, telling the new owners the commute was just too much. Sometimes, on a quiet summer night in our new, sterile suburban home, I'll wake up for no reason at 2:37 a.m., and I can almost hear it. A faint, distant giggle on the edge of hearing. If I hadn't been so desperate for coffee that night, I would have just kept driving past the flickering neon sign, and I wouldn't have their faces burned into my memory. It was the third week of July, and I was on the last leg of a grueling 14-hour drive home from a business trip in West Texas. The air conditioner in my sedan had given up the ghost somewhere outside of Lubbock, and now, at 1:30 a.m., the inside of my car was a sweltering, stagnant box. The highway was a lonely ribbon of asphalt, cutting through an endless, inky blackness. I hadn't seen another car for at least an hour. My eyelids felt like they had lead weights attached to them, and my throat was sandpaper dry. That's when I saw it, a single point of light shimmering in the heat haze ahead. As I got closer, it resolved into a flickering neon sign, LU's 24 AURS. It looked like a relic from another era, a forgotten outpost on a godforsaken stretch of road. The parking lot was empty save for a single pickup truck that looked like it had been there since the Ford administration. Every rational instinct told me to keep going, to find a well-lit, branded gas station. But the promise of caffeine was a siren's call. My desperation overrode my caution. I pulled off the highway and crunched to a stop on the gravel lot. The moment I stepped out of the car, the silence was unnerving. The usual night sounds, crickets, the hum of electricity, were absent. There was only a low, almost sub-audible buzz coming from the neon sign, which cast a sickly pinkish glow on the cracked pavement. The diner itself was a long, low building with large plate, glass windows so grimy you could barely see through them. I took a deep breath of the thick, humid air and pushed open the door. A small bell jingled weakly, the sound immediately swallowed by the heavy silence inside. The air was cool but stale, thick with the smell of old coffee, burnt grease, and something else I couldn't place. Something coppery and vaguely sweet, like old pennies. The diner was empty. A long formica counter with cracked red vinyl stools ran the length of the room. A few booths lined the opposite wall, their seats torn and patched with electrical tape. The only light came from a pair of humming, fluorescent tubes overhead that flickered intermittently, casting everything in a jaundiced, strobing light. Behind the counter, a man stood with his back to me, meticulously wiping down the already clean surface with a gray rag. He was tall and unnaturally thin, his spine a series of sharp ridges beneath a stained white t-shirt. "Evening," I called out, my voice sounding unnervingly loud in the quiet. He didn't startle. He simply stopped wiping and stood perfectly still for a long moment before speaking, his voice a low, gravelly rasp that seemed to come from deep in his chest. "Take a seat." He didn't turn around. I slid onto a stool at the counter, the vinyl cold against my skin. The silence stretched. I could hear the slow, deliberate thump of my own heart. I watched his back, waiting. He continued to stand there, motionless, for what must have been a full minute. I was about to say something else when he finally, slowly, turned to face me. My attempt at a friendly smile died on my lips. He was gaunt, his skin a pale, almost translucent gray, stretched taut over a skull-like face. His eyes were the worst part. They were large and dark, set deep in bruised-looking sockets, and they were utterly vacant. They weren't looking at me so much as through me. He moved with a slow, joint-popping stiffness, like a marionette with tangled strings. "Coffee," I managed to say, my throat tight. "Black, please." He gave a slow, deliberate nod and turned to the ancient-looking coffee machine behind him. As he reached for a mug, I noticed his hands. They were skeletal, the skin like parchment over the bones, with long, yellowed fingernails that were thick and almost claw-like. He poured the coffee, the black liquid steaming into the cool air, and slid the heavy ceramic mug across the counter toward me. It stopped a few inches from my hand. I wrapped my hands around the mug, the warmth a small comfort. I took a sip. It was bitter, burnt, and tasted vaguely of dirt. I forced myself to swallow. "Quiet night," I said, trying to fill the oppressive silence. He just stared at me, his hollow eyes unblinking. The fluorescent light above us buzzed and flickered, casting his face in a ghastly, shifting light. It was then that I noticed the other patrons. In one of the booths in the far corner, a man and a woman sat facing each other. They were perfectly still, their hands resting on the table. They weren't speaking or eating. They were just staring at the wall between them. Their clothes looked dated, like something out of a photograph from the 1970s. In the strobing light, their skin had the same waxy, gray pallor as the cook's. At the very end of the counter, a heavy-set man in a trucker cap was slumped over, his face hidden in his arms. He hadn't moved a muscle since I walked in. A cold dread began to seep into my bones. These people weren't customers. They were set pieces. "How much for the coffee?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I just wanted to pay and leave. The gaunt man tilted his head slightly, a gesture that was slow and unnatural. A faint, dry smile touched his thin lips, but it didn't reach his dead eyes. "First one's free," he rasped. His gaze flickered past me, toward the door, then back. "You should go now. The road gets dark." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a warning. A dismissal. The unspoken message was terrifyingly clear: you don't belong here. I didn't need to be told twice. I dropped a $5 bill on the counter. I didn't want to owe this place anything, and slid off the stool. "Thanks," I mumbled, not making eye contact. I walked toward the door, my back prickling, feeling his eyes, and the other eyes on me. I didn't dare look back at the booth or the man at the counter. The bell gave another weak jingle as I pushed the door open and stumbled back out into the humid night. I practically sprinted to my car, fumbling with the keys. As I jammed the key into the ignition, I risked a glance back at the diner. The gaunt man was standing in the doorway, a tall, skeletal silhouette against the sickly pink light. But he wasn't alone. The man and woman from the booth were standing on either side of him now, and the heavyset trucker was standing behind them. They were all standing there, perfectly still, a silent, gray tableau, watching me. I slammed the car into drive and peeled out of the gravel lot, spraying stones behind me. I didn't slow down until the diner's neon glow had completely vanished in my rearview mirror. I drove for another 2 hours, fueled by pure adrenaline, until I reached a brightly lit, bustling 24/7 truck stop. I sat in the parking lot for a long time, shaking, before I could bring myself to go inside. The next day, I looked at a map of my route. There was no diner, no side road, nothing for 50 miles on that stretch of highway. It was just an empty black line on a map. I know what I saw, though. I saw a place for people whose journeys were already over, and for some reason, they let me pass through. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness and landed on its face. It wasn't an animal. It was standing on two legs and it was smiling at me. That single, paralyzing moment was the culmination of an hour of escalating terror. But the night had started with such innocence. It was our one night off. We were counselors at Camp Pinewood, a group of 8, 19, and 20-year-olds high on cheap beer and the freedom of a summer away from home. Jake, our self-appointed leader, had suggested the hike. The old fire tower on Blackwood Ridge. He'd said, best view of the valley. Total cliché, but who cares? We'd all agreed. The hike up was beautiful. A warm August breeze rustled the leaves, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. We laughed and joked, our flashlights dancing like fireflies on the trail ahead. We were invincible, the kings and queens of this small, temporary kingdom. We reached the rusted metal structure of the fire tower just after midnight. The view was, as promised, spectacular. A blanket of distant town lights twinkling under a star-dusted sky. We hung out for over an hour, passing around a flask and telling the kind of ghost stories that are only scary when you're in the middle of the woods at night. Chloe, who was always the most superstitious, told a local legend about the Ridge Walker, a creature said to haunt the mountain, something that mimicked voices to lure people off the trail. We all laughed it off, playfully spooking her by rustling bushes when she wasn't looking. The irony is not lost on me. It was around 2 a.m. when we decided to head back down. The mood was still light, but a thin layer of mist had begun to roll in, muffling sound and making the familiar trail feel alien. I was walking near the back of the pack with my friend Liam. We were talking about college plans, lagging a bit behind the louder group up ahead. That's when we heard the first sound. A sharp snap of a twig from deep in the woods to our right. Deer, probably, Liam said, not breaking stride. But we both fell silent, listening. The main group was about 50 feet ahead, their voices and laughter fading slightly as they rounded a bend. Another sound, a soft, shuffling drag, like something heavy being pulled through the undergrowth. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. Liam slowed, his head cocked. "Yeah." That wasn't a deer. We stopped completely, our flashlight beams probing the dense wall of trees. The mist swirled in the beams, creating shifting, ghostly shapes. For a moment, there was only the sound of our own breathing. Then, from the same direction, came a voice. It was a perfect imitation of Jake's boisterous laugh. "What the hell?" Liam muttered, his face pale in the glow of his flashlight. We knew Jake was far ahead of us. We yelled out for him. "Jake!" "You guys wait up!" Our shouts were met with silence. No answer from our friends. But from the woods to our right, we heard a soft whisper that sounded exactly like Chloe. "Over here, help!" A cold spear of fear lanced through me. Chloe's ghost story. The Ridge Walker. It was a stupid campfire tale, but in the dark, misty woods, with those sounds, it suddenly felt terrifyingly real. "Don't," I said, grabbing Liam's arm. "It's not her. Let's just catch up to the others." Now. We broke into a jog, our feet pounding on the packed earth. The sounds in the woods kept pace with us. The shuffling, the snapping, and now a new sound. A low, wet, clicking noise, like someone chattering their teeth, but faster, harder. We could hear it moving parallel to us, always just out of sight behind the curtain of trees and mist. We rounded the bend where the others had disappeared, expecting to see them just ahead. The trail was empty. They were gone. Panic, cold, and absolute washed over me. "Jakey! Kikoyu!" we screamed, our voices cracking. The clicking from the woods stopped, and in the sudden, ringing silence, a low growl rumbled through the trees. It was a deep, guttural sound that vibrated in my chest, a predatory noise that spoke of hunger and malice. It was close, too close. We abandoned all pretense of bravery and ran. We sprinted blindly down the trail, branches whipping at our faces, our lungs burning. The thing in the woods crashed after us, no longer trying to be stealthy. It was heavy, breaking branches, and tearing through brush with incredible speed. It sounded huge. My foot caught on an exposed root, and I went down hard, my flashlight flying from my hand and extinguishing as it hit the ground. The impact knocked the wind out of me. Liam skidded to a stop, turning back, his face a mask of terror in his own wildly shaking beam. "Get up, man!" I was scrambling on my hands and knees, gasping for air, when the crashing from the woods burst onto the trail just ahead of Liam. He froze, his flashlight beam rising to illuminate it, and that's when I saw it. It was tall, probably 7 feet, and impossibly thin, its limbs long and jointed at odd angles like an insect's. Its skin was the color of wet clay, pale and hairless. It was standing on two long, digitigrade legs hunched over. But the face, that was the image that seared itself into my brain. It had no discernible nose, just two vertical slits. Its eyes were large, round, and jet black, reflecting no light. And its mouth was stretched wide in a grotesque, lipless smile, revealing rows of small, needle-like teeth. It took a jerky step toward Liam, its head tilting with a series of audible clicks. Liam was paralyzed, letting out a choked, whimpering sound. Adrenaline, or maybe just pure, primal terror, surged through me. I found my flashlight, its casing cracked but miraculously still working, and flicked it on, pointing the beam directly at the creature's face. It recoiled, letting out a high-pitched shriek that was a horrifying mix of a man's scream and a pig's squeal. It raised a long, three-fingered hand to shield its black eyes. That was the opening we needed. I grabbed Liam's shirt and pulled. We didn't look back. We ran harder than I thought was humanly possible, fueled by the image of that smiling face and the sound of its shrieking rage echoing behind us. We finally burst out of the trees into the main clearing near the camp, where we found the rest of our group, looking confused. "Where have you guys been? We've been calling for you for like 10 minutes. We couldn't explain. We just collapsed, babbling incoherently about what we saw. They didn't believe us. Not really. They thought we were trying to get them back for the earlier prank. But they saw the genuine, soul-deep terror in our eyes, and they didn't push it." The next morning, Jake and a few others, now curious, walked a little way back up the trail. They found my cracked flashlight, and next to it, pressed deep into a patch of soft mud, was a single footprint. It was long, narrow, and had 3 sharp toed impressions, belonging to no animal native to North America. No one talks about what happened on Blackwood Ridge anymore, but I know Liam and I will never forget. We were the butt of the joke, but we were the only ones who saw the punchline. I've never told anyone the truth about that night at the beach house. I tell them we were spooked by a prankster. But I saw its face in the window, and I know what it wanted. It was our anniversary, and I'd saved for months to rent the Seaside Serenity cottage. It was the last house on a long, sandy spit of land, promising total privacy. For the first 3 days, it was paradise. Just me and my girlfriend Chloe, the endless blue of the ocean, and the rhythmic sigh of the waves. We'd walk for miles down the deserted beach, feeling like the only 2 people on Earth. The isolation was the main selling point. By the 4th night, it would become our prison. The days were idyllic, but the nights held a strange quality. The sound of the ocean, so soothing during the day, took on a deeper, more powerful tone in the darkness. It sounded like something vast and ancient breathing just outside our walls. On the 3rd day, while walking the tide line, Chloe found something. It was a small, crudely made effigy of a person, woven from dark seaweed and bound together with strands of what looked like human hair. Its arms and legs were just spindly pieces of driftwood. It had no face. We both felt a little jolt of unease, but we laughed it off as some weird beachcomber art and tossed it back into the surf. Looking back, I think that was our first warning. On the 4th night, I woke up with a start. The digital clock read 3:14 a.m. The room was pitch black, but an oppressive silence had replaced the familiar sound of the waves. It was as if the ocean itself was holding its breath, and I had the unshakable, primal feeling of being watched. I lay still, listening, my ears straining. All I could hear was Chloe's soft, rhythmic breathing beside me. I told myself I was being paranoid, the strange little doll we found putting weird ideas in my head. Then I heard the scratching. It was a faint, wet sound, scrape, scratch on the large picture window next to our bed. It was the sound of fingernails, or something like them, being dragged slowly across the glass. My blood turned to ice. My first thought was a tree branch, but there were no trees on this barren spit of sand, only low, lying dune grass. The wind, the air was perfectly still. I gently shook Chloe awake. "Chloe," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "Wake up, listen." She mumbled, annoyed, but then she heard it too. Scratch, scrape, tap, tap, tap. Her body went rigid next to mine. "What is that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know," I lied. I knew it wasn't a what, it was a who, or a something. Slowly, inch by inch, I peeled back the edge of the curtain. The moon was full, casting a stark, silvery light across the deserted beach and the unnaturally calm, black water. At first, I saw nothing. The beach was empty. I felt a surge of relief. Maybe it was a shorebird, pecking at its reflection. I was about to say so to Chloe when a hand slammed flat against the glass right in front of my face. Chloe screamed. I stumbled backward, falling off the bed with a cry of shock. The hand was pressed hard against the pane, the pale flesh looking slick and almost translucent in the moonlight. The fingers were impossibly long and thin, with a faint, greenish webbing between them. Dark, jagged nails scraped against the glass, creating that horrific sound. It wasn't human. We scrambled to the far corner of the room, clutching each other, our eyes locked on the window. The hand stayed there for a full minute, the fingers twitching, before slowly sliding down and out of sight. We were both hyperventilating, choking back sobs. "Call the police!" Chloe cried. I grabbed my phone, but there was no signal, of course. Part of the Seaside Serenity package. We were completely cut off. After several minutes of agonizing silence, a morbid, stupid curiosity I will never forgive myself for compelled me to look again. I told myself I needed to see if it was gone. I crept back to the window, my body shaking uncontrollably, and peered over the sill. The beach was empty. There was nothing there. I looked down directly below the window. No footprints in the soft, damp sand. It was as if the hand had belonged to a ghost. I felt a flicker of insane hope. Maybe we had imagined it, a shared nightmare. And then a face rose into view from below the window frame. The images burned onto the inside of my eyelids. It was pale bulbous and glistening like the underbelly of a fish. It had no nose, only two small, dark slits that flared open and closed. The mouth was a wide, lipless gash that was stretched into a semblance of a grin, revealing a dark, empty maw. But the eyes were the size of saucers, perfectly round, perfectly black, and utterly devoid of thought or emotion. They were the cold, dead eyes of a creature from the abyssal depths, and they were staring directly at me. I didn't scream. The sound was trapped in my lungs. I was paralyzed, locked in its gaze. It just stared, its head tilting slightly, that grotesque grin never wavering. It knew I could see it. I think it was enjoying my terror. Chloe's terrified shriek broke the spell. "What is it? Get away from there!" I fell back, scrambling away from the window. "Don't look," I screamed at her. "For God's sake, don't look!" We didn't sleep. We dragged the heavy oak dresser in front of the bedroom door, barricading ourselves in. For the rest of the night, we listened. We heard the scratching move from the window to the walls of the cottage, a slow, deliberate circling of our flimsy wooden shelter. We heard a soft, wet thudding against the siding, over and over. It was testing the walls. It was looking for a way in. When the first gray light of dawn finally broke the horizon, the sound stopped. We waited another hour, until the sun was fully up, before we dared to move the dresser. We threw our things into our bags in a frantic haze and ran to the car. As I drove away, I looked back at the beach. The sand below the window was a mess of deep, strange tracks. They weren't footprints. They were wide, scalloped drag marks, leading from the cottage wall directly back into the ocean, disappearing into the surf. We told the rental agency the pipes were leaking. We told our friends we got food poisoning. It's easier than telling them the truth, that something ancient and hungry came out of the sea for us. I haven't been to a beach since. I can't even look at photos of the ocean without feeling that cold, dead gaze on me and seeing that face, rising from the darkness, smiling. It wasn't a prankster, it knew we were there. It was curious. And I think if it had found a way in, it wanted to take us back home with it.